Hello, beautiful people. My name is Emma.
And I'm MC.
And we are your hosts of the G-Forces podcast.
Welcome to Shop Talk Edition.
Yeah, so today we were hoping to kind of get into some details on sort of what's going on over a race weekend. MC?
Yeah, I mean, so with our first podcast episode out, we got some feedback from our lovely sister-in-law, Andy, who said she loved the episode. She thought it was very informative, but she had no idea what was going on. So what we want to do is put together kind of not only words that you're going to hear throughout the weekend, throughout a race weekend, but kind of just, we're in the middle of the 2023, racing season. And so we want to kind of do a quick dive into who's who, the, hot words you're going to hear, and just give you, F1 101, what you can say to an F1 expert to make yourself sound like, F1.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with just kind of a general overview of not only the teams, but the structures, the race weekend, as well as, what are they racing for? What is the end of the season? What's the end of season result? First off, we're going to talk about the teams. So in an F1 season, in the current 2023 season, there are 10 teams. Each team has 2 drivers, so there are 20 drivers on the circuit. So that is the main F1 drivers. There are reserve drivers, there are junior teams, there's a whole group of other drivers behind them. But the main guys we're going to be talking about right now is the main 20 F1 drivers. So, we're going to be going in terms of points right now for the Constructors' Cup, which is something we'll talk about at the end of the episode. So, stay tuned to hear about that. So, the first team we're going to talk about is the team Red Bull. Their 2 drivers are Max Verstappen, who Max is currently in his 9th season. He's from the Netherlands, and he is 25 years old. Max is probably the name you will hear the most right now. He is in first place, and I think it feels like everything. But Max is a name that you will hear all the time. Max's Red Bull teammate is Sergio Perez, who is also named Checo. You'll hear Sergio, you'll hear Perez, you'll hear Checo throughout the weekend.
Yeah.
They're all the same person. Checo is on his 13th season. He's from Mexico, and he's 33 years old. I weirdly feel like I'm a dating show, a Bachelorette episode, and I'm and this runner-up, So the next team we're going to talk about is Mercedes. So Mercedes is a powerhouse, just like Red Bull, and their 2 drivers. Their first driver is George Russell. George is on his 5th season. He's from the UK, and he is 25. And then they have someone who is very well known in the motorsport world, Lewis Hamilton. He is on his 17th season, I believe. For some perspective, I'm pretty sure his first F1 season, he might have been a reserve driver, but I think he started in 2007 in the F1 world.
Okay.
So his home country is the UK, and he's 38 years old. I love him. I think he is so humble. I think he is the epitome of what a good sportsman is.
Oh, 100%. I feel like he was born to be doing this.
Oh, without a doubt. He has such eloquent ways of talking about it, and there's such a way that he even talks about the younger drivers. I mean, he's 38. You have some guys who are young on the track right now. But yeah, so Lewis is a guy who is just, he's been in it forever. He's a multi-year world champion.
Yeah, he's considered one of the GOATs of F1.
Yeah. So that's Mercedes. That's George Russell and Lewis Hamilton for Mercedes. So the next team we're going to talk about, team number 3, is Aston Martin. So the first driver for Aston Martin we're going to talk about is Lance Stroll. Lance is currently on his 7th season. He is a Canadian, and he's 24. Fun fact, Lance's dad is he an owner of Aston Martin or an investor?
I think he owns a certain percentage of it.
Yeah, so his dad is financially involved in Aston Martin. And that does not take away from his skill on the track, I will say, so take that with how you will. And then I think he's the oldest driver currently on the track.
Oh, yes, he is.
Our boy Fernando Alonso. Fernando, again, I think this is, I don't know if this includes, reserve driver years, but he has been in the F1 circuit for he's on his 20th season.
Does that include the years that he retired?
No.
Okay.
So he had a quick stint. Fernando decided to retire and then was like, I'm back. Fernando is from Spain, and he is, 42 years old compared to his 24-year-old teammate.
And he's also won World Drivers' Championships.
Yeah, he is another, he's one of those names that, his experience alone, he's constantly talked about on the track. So in a race weekend, he's a big contender for just always
some
being
people
talked
consider
about.
him to be one of the best. I don't think we've watched enough of him personally
for us to
agree or disagree on that, but...
Oh, and I'm sure just, we just haven't seen it.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, so the next team is Ferrari. Ferrari is a team that goes back in time and history and is a powerhouse in F1. Their first driver is Carlos Sainz, who's in his 9th season. He's from Spain, and he's 28 years old. I don't really have, I don't know. He reminds us of Emma's dog. Emma, in the best way possible. Just like this, they make the same faces.
Yeah.
They have the same, yeah. So, the other driver for Ferrari is Charles Leclerc. Charles is on his 6th season. He is originally from Monaco, and he's 25. And I say originally he moved away, but I'm pretty sure
he still lives in Monaco.
He still lives in Monaco.
And he's very insistent on saying he is from Monaco. And meanwhile, his younger brother, Arthur, I'm pretty sure is we're pretty much friends. We are essentially from France.
I got into a huge debate, this was years ago, about what Monaco is with someone, and it turned into, it was a whole fiasco.
I think this was with me and
you might have been
Zach.
You might have been there. Yeah, you were.
Because I was convinced it was a city-state, and then our friend Zach was yelling at me saying, no, it's a country. I now know it's a country, but I'm pretty sure the American education system taught us that it was a city-state.
I can't distinctly remember my lesson on Monaco.
I do. I remember.
In American public school. But, all right, so those are the 2 Ferrari drivers, Carlos and Charles. Again, there are 2 names. Ferrari is a top team. There are 2 names you're going to hear all the time throughout race weekends.
Ferrari, just to also add in, I'm pretty sure Ferrari have participated in every season of F1 ever. They're the only team who have participated in every season, I think.
When I go over the 2 championships that we're kind of fighting for over the season, I have a Ferrari fun fact. So keep listening for that one. So team number 5 is McLaren. McLaren is they're English based.
Yes.
They're one of the historical English. They're UK based. They're one of the more historical teams, similar to Williams, similar to Ferrari. But their 2 drivers are Lando Norris, who's in his 5th season. He's from the UK, and he's 23. I will say, for new watchers of F1, for new listeners to us, I don't know. We're keeping an eye on not only Lando but his teammate Oscar. They're two really young guys who, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
I will
going
say-
to like what we saw prior to summer. Like, I'm excited to see what McLaren has in store.
I personally think Oscar and Lando are both future world champions.
Mm-hmm.
And I will
Hot
say,
take.
we might, I don't even know if it's a hot take. I think most people will agree with that. And I do think sometimes we might be a little bit biased because I think our favorite drivers at the moment are Lando and Oscar. But I think that they are definitely two people to watch out for.
Yeah. And so the other half of this McLaren powerhouse is Oscar Piastri. Oscar is in his rookie season. He's an Australian and he's 22. Yeah, we are huge papaya fans.
Yes.
I don't know. I just see good things. So we're a little biased to McLaren right now. Next team is Alpine. Alpine's two drivers. Their first one is Esteban Ocon, aka SDUSD. He's in his 7th season. He's from France and he's 26. We'll get into it if we ever do driver highlights, but, for those who haven't looked into it, definitely take, a quick dive into Esteban Ocon's life and how he got to F1. It's something we'll talk about later. It's not a cheap sport. There's a lot of money into it, and it costs a lot of money to be in it. But Esteban's story and just, the family dedication that he has is crazy. So, definitely look, a little closer into him. I don't know. I have, a soft spot for his story and him as a driver.
And even when he got into F1, it hasn't been the easiest road. I mean, there's been years where he didn't have a seat.
Yeah.
And he was a reserve driver, and now there's years where he's back and he's on the grid and he's driving again. And he's been able to win some races and be on some podiums. So, yeah.
Yeah. So the other side of Alpine is Pierre Gasly. He is also on his 7th season. He's also from France, and he's 27. Pierre's had a rocky road. He's been on a few teams, but another one that definitely, middle of the pack, good driver, overall good sport. So, another fan favorite.
Yeah, definitely had a rough go at Red Bull for a second. He was an AlphaTauri driver, and then he got moved to Red Bull for a bit of a season, and then they actually moved him back to AlphaTauri for the rest of that season. So, hasn't had the easiest road, but this is his first year on Alpine, and I know it's been a bit of a hard time for them, but I think he just actually did really well in one of the sprint races. So
Yeah.
I think it's hopefully an up from here.
Yeah. So, we're going to power through the next few teams. So, the next team is Williams. There are two drivers. The first one is Alexander Albon. He is on his 4th season. I'm pretty sure Alex was born in the UK.
Yeah, so
But
his mom is from
Thailand.
And you can only choose
One
one
country.
flag. And so he races under Thailand because I don't think there's been really any drivers from Thailand.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. But yeah, so he's 27 and he drives under the Thai flag. The other half of Williams is Logan Sargent. He's in his rookie season. He is from Florida, which, for those who don't know where Florida is, it's in the United States of America.
I think everyone knows where Florida is.
And he's 22. Quiet, don't know a lot. Interested to see what happens in the second half of the season. But yeah, only American on the track. So, yeah, I mean, I've seen things that they hope that, he brings in a bigger American audience. I just, I don't know. I have a soft spot in my heart for rookies. I always hope they got beyond that.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll see. The next team, while Logan is the only American driver currently on the circuit, the only American-based team is Haas. Their official name is the Haas F1 team. Their two drivers are a little bit more on the more experienced, older wiser side. Their first driver is Nico Hülkenberg. He's on his 12th season. He's German, and he's 36. He holds the record for most races entered
without a podium.
without ever being. He's never been on the podium.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Never say never.
Yeah.
The other half of Haas F1 team is Kevin Magnussen. He's in his 8th season. He's from Denmark, and he's 30 years old. So Kevin has been with Haas for a few.
It's been
a few.
Well, he was with them for a few years, and then he actually didn't have a seat for a few years, and then he came back.
And then he came back around
last year.
2022. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I like them. Haas, they're the underdog. Well, I will always root for an underdog. Alfa Romeo is the next team. Their 2 team members are, now, you know how to say it. Correct me, because I'm about to butcher this.
So, at least from everything that I've watched, it's Zhou Guanyu.
Okay. So, Zhou is on his 2nd season. He's from China, and he's 24. My God, this kid his outfits.
Oh, fantastic!
On point. It's just incredible. But yeah, I don't know. I'm excited. I want to see more out of him.
I agree.
I don't know. I think he's on a tough team right now, a tough car, but yeah, I don't know. He's another one similar to Logan, where they're just kind of flying under the radar. They're not names that you hear as much on a race weekend, but
every once in a while, like before the summer break, there was a race where both Alfa Romeo cars did really well in qualifying, which was super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Zhou, even on his F1 debut, qualified, or I think he even got points like in the top 10. So I think he's definitely a really great driver, and I unfortunately think the car is just not suiting him the best this year.
Yeah, and you can see that with his teammate. So the other side of Alfa Romeo is Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri is on his 11th season. He's Finnish, and he's 33. I mean, Valtteri he's a driver that was with Mercedes. He's a driver that was up there with Lewis Hamilton. And so to see kind of the struggles that we've seen in the last few races, I don't know. It kind of shows you when you see a driver that is on a team for a few years that's, hitting pole positions and getting on the podium, it really, cars can really affect a driver. And you see that every season. It's a toss-up.
100%.
So the final team we're going to talk about, the final team on the circuit out of all 10 is AlphaTauri. So the current drivers of AlphaTauri as of August of 2023 is Yuki Tsunoda. So Yuki is on his 3rd season. He's from Japan, and he's 23. He is, I feel like I'm about to sound like a grandma, but I feel like the only way to describe him is a firecracker. I don't know. Everything I've seen about him, it just seems like chaos in the best way.
Yeah.
He's just another young driver that I feel like he's dealing with a tough car. AlphaTauri it's a really tough car right now.
Yeah. And Yuki's really grown over the past few years. When he first started, I think he would kind of explode at his team during races, and now he's gotten a lot calmer, and he's matured a lot.
So the other half of AlphaTauri currently is Daniel Ricciardo. Daniel, or Danny, is on his 13th season. He is from Australia, and he is 34 years old. So the reason why we keep saying as of right now is because prior to summer season, prior to summer break, what were there? There were 2 races left for the season.
Yeah.
AlphaTauri started the season with a different driver. They didn't always have Danny Ricciardo. So the other driver that started off the 2023 F1 season is Nick DeVries. So he's a name you'll hear kind of still. People are still talking about it. There were two Grand Prix left until the summer break that we were just in. And AlphaTauri decided to pull him and replace him with Danny Ricciardo. So Nick DeVries was in his rookie season while he was with AlphaTauri. He's from the Netherlands and he's 28. They let him go, and it kind of rippled the F1 world. I mean, we were just kind of getting into the sport, and, we were aware of it.
He only had 10 races to show himself, so I think a lot of people were shocked, but also these are things that have happened with Red Bull before.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't too surprising at the same time, so.
Yeah. So, that is all of the current drivers and the teams of the 2023 season. Every season, things change, new drivers come in. Sometimes there's a new team, not always, but so that is the rundown of all the teams.
So, on to the next, I am going to talk about the structure of a team. So, the way that a team is structured in F1, there are a few main positions. So, one of the team positions that you'll hear pretty often on a race weekend is a team principal. So, a team principal is essentially the head coach in most other sports. They oversee the operations at the track and the factory, and they're also huge in the politics of the sport. So usually they're the ones who are talking to FIA officials, they're the ones who are submitting petitions, and they sometimes are even the ones who are dealing with sponsors. So they are a huge part of the team. They run the show, essentially. And then you have a technical director. There's a few different names from this. It could be like chief of technical or technical director. And so their job is to oversee the early car development. So they're the ones basically designing the car. So an example of someone in this position is Adrian Newey, and he is the mastermind behind Red Bull's current car. So, and I know he even has a book out basically on I think it's called like How to Build a Car.
Yeah, I'm actually planning on picking it up.
Yeah. And then another position is the head of race engineering. Again, there could be a few different names for this position, but their main task is to oversee all of the trackside engineering. So when you're actually at the circuit on the weekend for a Grand Prix, they're the ones who are overseeing everything basically going on inside of the garage, and they work back at the factory as well with a team of engineers. Some of those engineers include vehicle performance group, vehicle science group, and electrical engineering. So another position is the sporting director. From what I could tell, this is actually a relatively newer position over the past few years. It wasn't a thing in the past, but their job is to oversee all the pit crew activities. So they are basically the pit crew coach. And then the other ones that are the main ones that you'll see on the weekends are the mechanics. So each driver has a number one mechanic, and that mechanic is in charge of basically everything involving the car, making sure all the mechanics that work on the car are working correctly and everything's going smoothly. And then each mechanic also has their own specialist roles, and some are selected to perform roles in the pit stops. And then to kind of top off who you'll see on a race weekend is there are data analysts and a strategy team, and you'll see them kind of in the back of the garage. There's usually like a wall of computers.
They're always the ones in front of the computers.
Yeah, they're the ones standing there, and there's not just the people in the garage that are data analysts and the strategy team. They also have an entire team of people doing the same thing back in the factory, and they will send live data back to the factory even during the race, like while it's going on, and everyone will be working together. So one of the things that you'll see on a race weekend is called the pit wall. And so the pit wall is, you have the pit lane, which is obviously where the car is driving down to leave the garage. And on the opposite side of the garage, that's the pit wall. And it will have, in front of each team's garage, you'll have essentially like a desk, kind of, and it's got
It
five
honestly,
or so seats.
I hate to say it honestly looks like a bar.
Yeah,
It
it's like
looks
bar
like
seats.
it looks like it's like bar seats, and they're all sitting there.
There's computer screens in front of all of them.
And I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like they're the ones who are like, during the race, they're the ones talking to the driver. Like,
Yeah,
it's the
so
people at the pit wall. So you'll always see the team principal.
Yeah, so the old-fashioned, like, just basic way of having people on the pit wall, typically you would see a team principal, a sporting director, a chief technical officer, one of the strategy engineers, the head of race strategy, head of race engineering, and then these next guys, the individual drivers, race engineers, those are the ones that are talking to them constantly, giving them updates on where they are compared to other people, how many seconds away they are.
The weather.
Yeah, the weather. They're asking them questions like, hey, how do you think the tires feel right now? Do you think you want to come in? So they're the ones who are communicating with them 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So each driver has their own race engineer, and those are the ones talking to them. Sometimes you will see a team principal jump in here and there and mention something to the driver, but usually that's after a race, and it's typically like if they did really well in a race or if they won, you'll hear audio of the team principal jumping on and talking to them, saying, like, congratulating them. So that's just a basic structure of how a team works, and usually the kind of people that you'll see on a race weekend. Speaking of race weekends, so we have 23 race weekends in total. The typical layout of a race weekend is on Thursdays we have media days. So media days are the times when drivers have press conferences with F1, and they have usually some videos that they have to film with their sponsors, and
Most of the TikTok content, most of the...
even a lot of other podcasts who interview the drivers.
Yeah.
Thursday will be the day that all of that is done. And then Friday is typically, you have free practice 1, which people call FP1, and free practice 2, FP2. Each practice session is a 1-hour session where usually teams will have a strategy on what they're going to run during that time. So sometimes you'll see the results where a car who typically will come in first, sometimes they're not in the first place results for the practice session, and that could just be because the team decided to run a strategy where they were testing to see how the car worked on specific tires.
Yeah, I mean, you'll even see during the practices, I mean, back to what you were saying about all of those data teams, like the 2 practice hours they're given is the time where I think most teams are collecting their most data.
Yes.
That's their team that they can, all the upgrades that they've made between races, upgrades they've made to their car, they're testing out. That's the first time that a lot of them are getting their drivers in the car on the track. So, like, those practices are so pivotal to just, like, the data, how the car is running, the driver. So, while it just, like, you know, think about practice from our high school days, you know, we'd screw around. Like, these practices are so pivotal to so much information for races, not only for the weekend, but going forward.
Yeah. And they do have another practice session, usually that's FP3 on Saturday morning. And this is actually the last time a team can make changes to their car before qualifying. So there's a term called parc fermé. I think that's how it is pronounced. It's French. I don't speak French, so I apologize if I butchered that. But essentially it means, I think it was a closed garage in French. And so there's a certain time period where teams are allowed to make changes to their cars, and then after that, usually once it hits qualifying, if you make any changes to your car, you're penalized. Typically, drivers will have to then start the race on Sundays from the pit lane. That's just usually what happens if they say they crash during qualifying. Going into qualifying, qualifying is typically you have 3 qualifying sections within an hour essentially. So you have Q1, which is 18 minutes long, and all 20 drivers are out on the track and racing. And the main goal of qualifying is to get the fastest lap you possibly can in the time that you're allotted. And so if you do not get the fastest time and say you're the 5 slowest drivers, then you are actually eliminated from the next qualifying session. And so Q2, there's only 15 drivers as opposed to 20, and this is 15 minutes, and then after this one, the 5 slowest drivers are then eliminated again. And so now going into Q3, there are only 10 drivers, and this is 12 minutes long, and again, the main goal is to get the fastest lap possible. And at the end of Q3, the setup, the order of how people are going to be starting for the race on Sunday, this is how it's set. So say you end up getting 12th in Q2, then you will be starting 12th in the race on Sunday morning. And that's just how it goes.
You also have to understand, like, these qualifying, this isn't like they're doing qualifying, they're doing that 18-minute drive, and then they have 3 hours. No, it's like lightning dome, like lightning rapid fire.
It's one right after another.
It is so quick that, honestly, sometimes it feels like watching one round of practice is longer than all the rounds of qualifying. Yeah. Just because there's no time. So, like, you're getting eliminated, and these drivers are just, like, pulling off the track super fast.
Yeah.
So, for anyone who hasn't watched before, this round is speed.
Yeah. So then you get to Sunday, and it is the actual race, the main Grand Prix. And so the way that a race is started, you have a formation lap. So all the cars will go out onto the grid, the track, and then they are in their order that they were placed in based off of qualifying. And so a formation lap, they just basically drive one slow lap in their order around the track. And this is just to make sure that all of the audio works to their engineers, and then also just to kind of heat the tires up a little bit. And then after that formation lap, before they get to the start/finish line, they all get into their spots. And then the way that the race starts, it is 5 pairs of lights turn on, and then once they turn off, the race starts. And then once you obviously hit the finish line, after a certain number of laps, depending on the race, you then, once you see the checkered flag, it is the end of the race. And at the end of this race, that's the top 10 finishers get points, but MC is going to go into that a little bit further. And after you have finished the main race, you have the podium ceremony. So that is the top 3 finishers, and the national anthem of each of the race winners' home country is played, and the race winners' team's home country. So that's just the general structure of a regular race weekend. But then you have sprint weekends, which the order of what a sprint weekend was, it was different a few years ago as opposed to now. So this year, the way that a sprint weekend works, you have your Thursday media day again, and then Friday you have free practice 1, and then you actually have your qualifying session for the main race on Friday afternoon, and that's again to set the order for the grid for the Grand Prix. And then Saturday, you have your sprint qualifying, which is the same qualifying, essentially, as the day before. You're just doing it again. And this is to set the order for the grid for the sprint race. And then in the afternoon on Saturday, you have the actual sprint race, which is just a shortened version of a regular race. And it could just be half the laps.
Yeah.
And then on Sunday, you have, also just to finish up the sprint race, if you are in the top 8 scorers for the sprint race, then you get some points for your team. And then on Sunday, you have the full Grand Prix race, and that is just the same situation as a regular race weekend. So that is typically how a race weekend goes. So the next thing I'm going to get into are the tires for a weekend. So just a brief overview of the tires and the company that runs the tires.
The current company.
Yes, the current company. In the past, there used to be other companies. There used to be multiple companies at once, actually, that I think the term was coined for. It was like tire wars. But anyways, the current company that is supplying the tires is Pirelli. They are an Italian manufacturer, and they have supplied F1 teams with tires since 2011. And there are 6 slick compounds of tires. So they go from softest to hardest. There are C0 all the way up to C5. And then there are intermediate tires and full wet tires. So those are the ones that are used usually in inclement weather. And the way that the tires work for a race weekend, Pirelli picks 3 compounds of the slick tires, so the C0 to C5 tires. They pick 3 of those compounds to bring for each team, and they figure out which tires to bring based off of the characteristics of the track and the weather and the climates.
Now, you have to remember, like, these are races that are all over the world. So you have arid climates, you have tropical climates, you have wet climates, you have dry climates. Like, you have everything under the sun. You have cold weather, you have really, really hot weather. So think about, like, that's 5 different types of tires that they have to decide every weekend based off of temperature, based off of weather.
Yeah.
And so it is super pivotal and something that's talked about, but I feel like it's never really explained.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And so on a race weekend, you'll notice that the soft tires for that weekend, they have a rim that's colored red. The mediums are yellow, the whites are hard, and the greens, those are the inters, and the blues, those are the wet. And so usually over the weekend, since they're only bringing 3 compounds of the slick tires, the softest compound, so that would be the C0s, or like the lowest number in the bunch, those would be considered the softs, and then the next one would be considered the mediums and hards. The softs tend to wear down much faster than the hards,
but they're best used in what?
Fast.
And they're best used in what weather?
Warm. I don't know exactly.
But, like, would you use softs in the rain?
Oh, absolutely not.
You would die.
I don't think you would. You would get into a major crash.
It's just not advised.
Yeah, you would not have very good grip.
Okay.
But they have really great grip for a short period of time in dry, warmer weather, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So, and just to kind of finish up tires, so drivers are given 13 sets of dry weather tires, 4 sets of intermediates, and 3 sets of full wets for a race weekend. Typically, there are some weekends that differ because some regulations are being tested, but this is just the general idea of kind of what's going on. An extra set of softs is reserved for those who actually reach Q3 in the qualifying session. And then the only other rule is that all drivers must use at least 2 different slick compounds in the race, provided it is a dry track. But overall, tires do have a huge impact on a race weekend and the car that you're even racing. And because they have such a huge impact, and you'll notice it's talked about a lot in a race weekend, that's why we wanted to kind of go over it briefly now.
There's also, like, a huge mystery around the tires. Like, everyone talks about these tires, and, like, no one but the tire manufacturers knows about the tires. Like, I don't know. The tires are just, I don't know. People get weird about tires.
I think my favorite fun fact about F1 tires is that they have little tire warmer blankets. And there's a certain time that you're allowed to put them on before a race.
They're so cute.
I think that it's really funny that the tires have blankets. But, yeah. So, the next thing that we're going to go over is just the point system of F1.
to wrap it up, we kind of wanted to talk about what are we racing for? What are all these points? What are we doing here? They're not just driving around in circles to drive around circles. One would hope. So there's two, championships that these guys are racing for. That these teams are racing for, I think is the proper way to say. So you have the Drivers' Championship and then the Constructors' Championship. And both are simultaneously happening. Each race, you gain points for each championship. They're simultaneously happening. So we're going to talk about the Drivers' Championship first, and then we'll get into the Constructors. So for the Drivers' Standings Championship, F1 World Championship, they all mean the same thing. If anyone says, do you know about the Drivers' Championship? You'll say, oh, you mean the Drivers' Standing? Confuse people. Make yourself look smarter. So, drivers get points based off of their finishing position and performance in the race weekend. So, if you place in 1st through 10th, you gain points towards the Drivers' Championship. So, 1st place gets 25 points, 2nd place will get 18 points, 3rd place gets 15 points, and so on down to 0. If you place 11 points, you're getting nothing. 11th to 20th, you get no points towards this section. Honestly, I don't think from all my research, you don't get any points. 11th through 20th. You get nothing. Nothing. So.
Nothing.
Nothing.
It was a waste of time.
Important to note that drivers can score an additional point towards the Drivers' Championship if they go the fastest lap for the race. So, we saw, was it Spa that we saw Max Verstappen came in 1st place, and Lewis,
There was 2 laps left.
There's 2 laps left, and Lewis Hamilton was like, let's go for it, and ended up winning fastest lap right at the end, so he got that point. So, that's how you get Drivers' Championship. And the Drivers' Championship that's when you hear, Max Verstappen is whatever, Lewis Hamilton, world champion. So that is for the individual driver. Then the other side is, these cars, there is a village of people that are working on these cars. So why would just the guy who's driving it, obviously he's doing more than just driving it, but, why would no one else be awarded anything?
Yeah, sorry to cut in, there's an average of, depending on the team, there are 300 to, I think it was 1,400 people on an F1 team at all times, and that's not just including the people that are there over the weekend, but that's including all the people in the factories.
So many important people.
Yeah.
It really, it takes a village, just so many other sports. But, this is just, they're constantly working on these cars. So, where the Drivers' Championship is about just the driver, this Constructors' Championship really just measures the team performance. So, it takes into consideration how the 2 drivers of the team did. And that is how points are awarded, because if both drivers do really well, then that shows, based off of results, it shows that you have a really good car. And so, basically, the only way you're able to earn points for this Drivers' Championship is if both of your drivers place in the top 10. So if you have both drivers place in the top 10, that's how you gain points. So if you have a driver in 5th place, but then you have another driver in 15th place, you're not going to gain any points towards the Drivers' Championship. I wasn't able to find the way the points are laid out. Obviously, I'm sure if you Google it right now, it's the first thing you'll find. But I don't know, how the points, I would assume they're bigger than the Drivers' Championship points based off of what I've seen. Red Bull right now is in, the 500 point range. So, I think it means a lot. But I'm not sure if there's more involved in the way points are awarded. But from my research, it said that both of your drivers have to be in the top 10. And it just shows that you have a strong car. So, I think that's why you have certain teams that are in the 100s of points, and then other teams that are still, 3 to 9 points.
Well, and the Constructors' Championship is the reason why it's not just an individual sport. It's such a team sport when it comes down to it, because say you have both of your cars battling it out, your team's probably going to tell it's going to tell one of your cars, okay, back off and let the other teammate ahead of you, because they would so much rather this person finish before the other than for them to battle it out and potentially do damage to the car and then both crash or one of them crash, and then they won't be able to get points in the Constructors' Championship. And the Constructors' Championship is a huge part of sponsorships as well.
Well, I also think the Constructors' Championship, well, the Drivers' Championship is, awesome, and obviously we've had some incredible drivers in the past win it multiple times. I think that there's such a beauty to the Constructors' Championship because, we've read and we've seen through clips and through just socials, those engineers, those mechanics, those guys who you see in the garage, drivers' weekends, they're not sleeping. In the off seasons, the guys working in the factories, they're working in a time crunch, even though it seems like there's all this time. And so I think that the Constructors, Championship is such a homage to, there are so many more important people.
Yeah.
That it's not just a single driver. And I think that that shows the beauty of F1, that there are so many opportunities to be a winner in that sport.
I agree.
So that's the 2 championships and the reason why all these crazy, silly races are happening. But so that kind of brings us to the end of Shop Talk. We're planning on dropping episodes probably a tad shorter than today's, but we just kind of want to highlight things that we know we've struggled with, just kind of knowing that it seems like everyone on TV seems to just talk about really fast, and we want to shed a light on knowledge that we didn't have until now with our viewers. So thanks for listening and learning with us, and I think that's all we have. Do you have anything else?
No, I don't. Just make sure to like and subscribe, everyone.
Yeah, follow us on all the things, and
yes, definitely, please.
Rate, subscribe, listen, and we'll see you soon.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.